Hi, this is Dr. Thomas Rocco from CBD Health Podcast. Today's guest is Todd Davis from CBD Unlimited. Todd has great experience with being involved with the company since 2014 and wants to share his experience and his great products. Todd, thanks for taking time out of your busy day to spend time with us on CBD Health Podcast. Hi, Todd. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Dr. Rocco?
I'm good. It's great to talk to you today. So
Yeah.
I was looking up a little bit about you. It seems like you've been involved with CBD for several years now. You
Yeah,
did
we're one of the early companies in the arena.
when did you start?
2014 in earnest, we started.
Wow, that is really very early, very, very early. Because when you talk about a lot of companies, they've started, I would say like 3, 4 years ago. But when you started that far back, you're one of the first companies to really, you're way ahead of before anybody else was starting to get involved with CBD. That's amazing. Because I'm looking at your resume. You started CBD Unlimited, and how is that the company that started in 2014, or was there something else before that?
Well, the parent corporation is Endexx Corporation.
Mhm.
So we created CBD Unlimited to really isolate what we were going to do with the plant, because we really didn't know at the beginning. I had some concerns about dosing. I had some concerns about what does it mix well with? How do you purpose it? How do you use it? And the products that we were seeing highlighted in the cannabis space in the dispensaries, there was no controls. There was,
Right.
an agent or a weed guy would sit there and say it's good for this. They would list off a bunch of things and are going, they really don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
So having a bit of a biotech background in the investment banking arena and in the science arena, I said, why don't we just do a dosing trial? I'll recruit some doctors and we'll figure out how to dose this thing. And then we targeted places on the body that we could target orally,
Right.
breathing it on the skin, in the stomach, in the small intestine. Where do you stick it? Where do you put
Right.
it? Where are the receptors? The the research, in my opinion, was still very low grade and very hard to get to. Most of it was out of Israel.
Right.
So
In the year 2014, there was nothing, absolutely nothing.
correct. And there was nothing there was if you had access, there was some academic research papers that
Mhm.
went all the way back into the 70s, but they really didn't know what they had. They're testing it in a whole plant theory. They
Right.
were trying to isolate THC, but they didn't really know what the rest of the plant material was doing, and how it was affecting the rest of the testing.
Right.
So it was a very strange environment to start a product with, and I think we really did the necessary diligence and early stage research to set up products that were functional for people,
Right.
that they could rely on with some
Mhm.
consistency, and they weren't just guessing, is it going to work for me or not? It either works or it doesn't work, but there is a narrow range of dosing that's effective,
Mhm.
and then the carrying agents that you carry the molecule with are important also.
Right. Right.
So
So you're way ahead of your education as for me. They didn't talk about marijuana much, or they didn't talk about CBD at all in med school. I got into marijuana education when the licensing was legal in our state in Rhode Island. So that was 2011. And I didn't really learn about CBD until 2018, 2019, when it became more popular. So you're way ahead of the curve in terms of
yeah.
CBD, as a company, as an education. And I I got into it because I got so many questions about CBD because it was getting as popular as, THC and
From your
marijuana.
from your patients, you
Just
mean?
for my patients. Yeah, I didn't know
Yeah.
what to say. So now at least I have some type of way to educate them and give the right dosing. But what's interesting is for you, you started in 2014. Things have gotten better, I think, in terms of CBD. The buying it's still expensive. It's much cheaper than it used to be.
Correct.
But I think that, like you talked about, like how to carry it into the body, I think that's improved as well. And I'm sure you have changed as in the last decade about how people use it and how it's going to now have a better experience or a better benefit or a better effect on the body. I'm sure that's changed over that time.
It has changed. I mean, achieving therapeutic value in any product is difficult.
Right.
Once you find a targeting zone to target the delivery into, then you have to evaluate it. Was it the same as the other target that we delivered into? Is it a different response? Did we need more? Did we need less? What were the additional plant-based materials you could put with it to even enhance the performance?
Right.
So yeah, we evaluate over 400 patients with 4 doctors.
Wow.
Over the course
That's
from 2014 to 2020, almost in that range. What we saw was extraordinary, but it's extraordinary as the hype that was in the market. But scientifically, it was extraordinary because we were watching the statistical numbers on the blood work, on the heart rate, on the metabolism, and every different part of the a patient who was under duress or compromised immune systems. We saw all of them improve. There was nobody who did not improve. Right. And, at that point, I knew this is going to be a benefit for doctors, but they really have a curve to go through to understand how to either complement, support, or displace using these type of materials to treat a patient. So I would imagine in 2018, 2019, people are in panic mode. They're seeing all this advertising, they're seeing claim statements, they're seeing the hype and the BS that was out there. And we knew the entire time is, listen, we're just going to stay consistent with what we do because we know what works and we know what doesn't work. And we'll let the bad actors disappear over time. And in last year and this year, the big shakeout has really taken place. There are thousands of companies are gone.
Right. There was a big money grab, 2018, 2019. I totally agree. I think we're better now at better companies like you. I think the companies that started before that 2018-19 kind of push, I think companies come and gone, and the real ones are still around making the right CBD, doing the certificate analysis, doing it the correct way.
Yeah, it's not just the certificate of analysis. That was kind of a self-regulating for the industry tool to use. What about safety data sheets? What about the COA on the rest of the materials? So when you're using plant-based items, you have to do a COA on all of it. You can't select because one pollutant from one ingredient could affect it. If I'm mixing CBD with turmeric, where did the turmeric come from?
Right.
So you have to go create a due diligence profile for each ingredient to make sure that you're at least in compliance with what would be considered pharmaceutical process or pharmaceutical guidance.
Right.
And none of this there's no exact science in any of this. And even in the pharmaceutical world, there's nothing exact. You're trying to get a standard mean or a standard within a standard deviation of what the normal should be. So there's some reliance on that data that's provided to you. And that for us is, we made our claim to fame by saying we're the science and compliance company. Whatever we put on the shelf is going to be based on scientific foundation, and it's going to be the most compliant product over and above what the rest of the industry might do.
Right. And that's I can't tell you, so important. Now, you talked about these patients with the doctors. Is there something that people could read publicly about it? Is it an article that's come out in a journal? Is it something
Not really. It was a compilation. Doctors are not the best at gathering data.
No.
So
I'm one of them.
we would have a grid, and we would do it. So we had to give the doctor something to comply to, or his nurse, whoever was practitioner with him. So the first couple trials we looked at patients that had diabetic neuropathy. So these were podiatrists that had patients. Every one of the patients was scheduled for some type of procedure to reduce pain, ablate pain, amputate, do something that was harsh, and it required a decision. So the patients that were initially recruited, were patients that were typically on anywhere from 10 to 15 medications. They were immobile. They were in really bad pain, especially with neuropathy. And The second thing we could on the intake, we could register them are, what's your pain scale? So the same way you would see any patient on a scale 1 to 10, where's your pain? 6, okay, we can manage that. 10, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
Right.
So depending on the feedback from the patient, we could start there. The second thing was, if you're taking this according to our trial basis, once a day dose, twice a day dose, 3 times a day dose, were you sleeping better? If you got up at nighttime to go pee, did you go back to sleep, or did you have insomnia? Did that improve? So we could measure those two things, and then everything else could kind of fall in place around the perimeter. And that's where it was extraordinary. For a patient that would get up 3 or 4 times a night, one of those times they would typically get stuck in an up cycle. So they'd be awake for an hour or 2 before they could go back to sleep. Most people would get up, go pee, come back to bed, go right back to sleep. Quality of life improvement right there. Can't make a medical claim on it, but you could do something. Then we had people wear the Fitbit watches and the Apple watches at nighttime. All of their REM cycles were improving. Their deep sleep cycles were improving. And some of them were extraordinary, 1,000%. They would go from having 5 or 10 minutes to having an hour, to having 2 hours. And they started expanding out the amount of time they were sleeping during that time, just because their body was more calm.
Sure.
And our target was inflammation. It was not to stop anxiety or anything else. If we could reduce inflammation across an entire system, could we show improvement across an entire system? That's ultimately what it produced. Their neuropathy pain, typically in the first week, there was a 60 to 65% reduction in neuropathic pain.
Wow.
You get out to 2 weeks, it got up to about 68% across the board.
Wow, that's great.
That was a change of life, so we knew, and that's how we kind of dialed in the ranges, could we get consistency at that 68% level? Didn't matter if we had 10 patients, 20 patients, or 100 patients. So that's every time we were in that 60+% range, that's where we would set the dosing.
Right.
And then build around that.
Now, when you did this, I'm sure you did it with dosing and the frequency they took during the day. Was it specific for everybody the same, or as the patient wanted to do it?
At first, we started off saying, we want you to do 2 doses per day, once before breakfast and once 30 minutes before you go to sleep. So, and don't do it with food, don't do it with a drink, let it soak in, give it at least 15 minutes to clear, so we would know something else was not affecting it.
Right.
And that was just basic guidelines. How compliant the patients are, we don't know.
Right, you don't know.
It's.
Do you know what dose you started at in terms of the CBD dose?
We started in a range of 1 to 2 milligrams, and we never exceeded 10 milligrams.
Really? That's not a very high dose, too. That's not a high dose.
And there's some studies that, we started to read other studies that were coming out, and there was one study that came out. It was okay data-wise, but we experimented with it to see if it was true or not. A tall person can absorb more and utilize more than a short person. It had nothing to do with weight.
Really? That's interesting.
So
I didn't know
shorter people could use 2 to 3 milligrams per dose and be highly effective. Especially smaller women, they would do 2 milligrams and they would do it twice a day. That was it. So they kind of self-adjusted to it. Then we figured out how to, measure, how do you make it more easily dosable by the patient? Before they would say, you take an eyedropper full.
Right.
An eyedropper full it's different every time. So we put it in measurements per drop. So we found the right percentages where we could tell a patient if they want to take 5 milligrams, you take 5 drops. So you had to have the percentages right. And then you had to up and down the rest of the material to adjust to make sure that it was palatable, that it was tolerable, that it didn't have other effects on them. So starting off with drops alone, we figured that out early on. And the a next stage of development was, we knew that oral delivery system was good. We knew that it didn't matter in the mouth. It's not a sublingual product. A sublingual product is something that goes under the tongue and it has a specific molecular weight or molecular size that makes it absorbable under the tongue. The rest of it is mucosal membrane. So the roof of the mouth, the cheeks, the gums, everywhere it touches, it's hitting receptors that or getting into the bloodstream that way.
Right.
And that's what allows, from a signaling molecule aspect, allows it to get into the brain, into the receptors that are in the brain so rapidly. Inhaling with vaping was the most effective. You could take the lowest dose and get the fastest results with vaping. It's the rest of the material in vaping that's the issue.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, what are you inhaling? What's going in? Do you need to take it into the lungs, or can you just puff and get the same oral delivery and sinus delivery? So can't control it. So we had to kind of back away. We knew the science was good there, but until we have a very effective and a measurable non-pollutant device and extra material, it's not worth going down the path medically.
Right.
You know, from a lifestyle thing, I think it's okay. Those formulations have gotten much better too.
You really have done your due diligence, and better than anybody I've ever spoken to who's been in a company, because you truly wanted to do this right, do the right dosing, and give some experience with people that are buying it. Do people call for advice to CBD Unlimited, or is it
They
something
do,
just
and we have to say, listen, we're not doctors.
yeah,
We've embraced doctors. We've embraced the medical community. We're available. I do a lot of speaking like this with doctors and even with their patients while the doctor's there, because the doctor just doesn't know. And
Right.
the doctor can learn a little bit more and say, I never thought of using it that way.
Mhm.
And what I see in a doctor's mind is they become doctors again. They now have a new tool. They have to say, all right, if this tool works, what am I going to use it with? How am I going to administer this to patients? What type of patient am I going to use? They put science in their brain back to work again, and instead of just reaching for a prescription pad.
Right.
That to me has been fascinating. And, you know, as you know, most doctors are not trained in nutrition or plant-based anything. It's all chemistry and physics. So it's, you know, it's a different world for most doctors to perform in. So yes, we're available. We talk to them. You know, I have a couple little old ladies that sit on the phone to talk to other little old people and say, this is how I use it.
Right.
It's kind of like the mother's remedy.
Yeah.
You know, that's how they go, you know what? I had a headache the other day and I put a little bit right here on my temples in the back of my head. And sure enough, it went away. I can't publish that.
Right.
But two old girls talking together saying, you know what I used it for the other day? That's the extraordinary thing about even some of the topicals, because we didn't know how to test the topicals. We're going, well, what do you do? Where do you stick it? You put it in your armpit, you put it behind your ear. You know, what part of the body does it need to go on? Is it direct site of pain do you put it on? So we did a lot of testing in that field. And what we ultimately, the science proved to tell us why it was so successful, there's receptor sites in the sebaceous gland.
Really? Who knew that? Right. No kidding.
You know, is it because we thought maybe it's signaling through the skin? We you know, it's nerve to nerve contact. You know, what is it going on? It's the receptor sites are in everybody's skin. So that proved to be just kind of an accidental understanding and getting it right early on.
Right.
And the topicals, you know, from a compliance and regulatory standpoint, are still the safest way for a company like us to bring product into the market.
Right.
The least regulated.
Do you harvest your own CBD, or are you getting it from somewhere else in the country? Because I know
you know, early on, no, not in Arizona. Most of mine comes from Colorado still.
Okay.
You know, in 2014, when they launched the pilot program, I went to the farm fields that first grew the first farms, had the first greenhouses, had the first farm fields. We tested soil, we tested water, we looked at the environment, what could affect the plants. Because hemp is, for one, it's kind of like grapes, like grapevines. Whatever the environment is around that grapevine isn't going to affect the flavor or the aroma or the robustness or the thinness or the acidity. It's the same thing with hemp. It extracts everything from the environment. So if you're planting hemp in a super site, you know, that was a chemical spill one day, that plant is pulling all of that out. If it's a farm field, it's going to pull out the fertilizers and chemicals. So you have to be careful where it's from. So I found the first few sites that kind of passed the test. Then I found the extractors. The extraction was a brand new thing. You know, there weren't pharmaceutical grade extractors, and the food extractors were more bulk items. So if we were going to isolate it, we wanted to see the practices there. So we worked with extraction companies that could do this in an ISO certified manner in a clean room that could do it efficiently and produce the same results over and over. So starting back in 2014, 2015, 2016, that was really the testing grounds for that. And the one variable that we've seen on hemp that changes from field to field is the terpene profile.
Mm-hmm.
The terpene profile can make the oils that come out of it either palatable or awful.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If there's a bitter terpene profile in there that's beyond what the normal bitter terpene profile is for hemp, it's a bad experience for the
Mm-hmm.
patient. And some of those terpenes, at the wrong levels could be toxic. They have an element of defense for the plant, right. So it ultimately could be telling you to reject it. So from a botany standpoint, from an agricultural science standpoint, all of these things affect that supply chain for the CBD industry. And we've been consistent. We've stayed loyal to our providers because it's the only way that we can rely on our own formulas is to make sure we're bringing the same ingredient to the same batch each and every time. And there's a compliance chain and a chain of custody registrar that we can always point to if the federal government wanted to come in and see what we're doing. Right. Here's where we get it. Here's why we get it. We test. So all very important.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a really safe company. I was looking at, the CBD Unlimited website. You have obviously the edibles, the oils, the topicals for pets, but you also have something interesting. Like there's a Maggie's line. Is that something that's specific, named after somebody you know? And there's also an X line.
Well, I've always liked the line. I've always liked the name Maggie, and I've had many Maggies in my life. Ultimately, I met a woman, an entrepreneur in San Diego at a show, and she had all these products for that were plant-based products for hair care and face washes and pain, and she had a bunch of little things. It was very cute, and I said, listen, I go, have you ever tried to infuse any of the hemp products? She goes, well, I've heard about it. I go, do you mind if I try your products? Let me add to the value of them and see what it does to the performance. And she said, sure. So we set up a little agreement, and she gave me the formulas, and we created a couple small batches, and then we would get volunteers to try it, and it was great. So over time, when you're a small entrepreneur and you're doing small batching, it's a pinch of this, a pinch of that, there's no way to replicate the same formula twice in a row. So I had to go through every ingredient. We got rid of some ingredients, put some enhancing ingredients in there, and ultimately ended up with 14 ingredients in Maggie's Balm, for instance.
Right.
And Maggie was actually the entrepreneur. So I said, Maggie, I hope you don't mind, but I've wanted to have my own Burt's Bee or my own, a kind of a folksy name.
Sure. Yeah.
Everybody knows one. I go, I want to use your name. I go, hope you don't mind. She goes, no, go ahead.
Right.
So that's where, it was kind of born from that. And
because
we took her base foundation and it worked out great.
Yeah. It's a mist and a bomb. What is the mist?
Yeah. When we say mist, the mist is the mist is a pump. It's a spray.
Just a spray.
So instead of rolling something on where the roller ball can pull back in bioavailable ingredients back into your formula, the spray administers it right to where the spot is. You can also put it in your hand and administer it on the back of your neck, or if in hard to reach places where someone who's less mobile, they can pump it a couple times and hit the spot. It's the fastest relief mechanism we've seen.
Really?
There is alcohol and there's menthol in it where the alcohol pulls away, allows the menthol to cool, and then you feel the CBD and the ashwagandha and some of the arnica kick in. And they get deeper penetration. They start functioning faster, and you get 4 to 8 hours of immediate relief.
Really?
Within seconds, you feel relief.
To look at that.
And after minutes, you see people moving their head better. One of my favorite instances. This is one of those you wish you had on camera. A woman came up to us at a dog food show or a dog product show, and we had the mist, and we were giving people free samples and free treatment. She comes up, she goes, this is a 40-year-old woman. I haven't been able to wash my own hair in months. I couldn't reach back and pull my hair into a ponytail. So her hair was just there flat. And I said, do you want to try it? And she goes, I'm willing to try anything. I go, can I touch your hair? This is in front of a big crowd of people standing in the line to get treated. So I pull her hair back, I spray it on her neck, and she started crying.
Wow.
I go, is it hot? What's going on?
Yeah.
This is really early on. She goes,
Right.
no. She goes, the pain stopped almost immediately. I'm going,
Wow.
come on. There's no way,
Yeah.
And after about a minute, she reaches up and she grabs her hair and she goes to pull it. And then she started bawling. She goes, it was a natural reaction. She didn't feel pain. So she reaches up. Now she can touch her hair, bawling. An entire line of people, everybody in the booth, we're all just sitting there crying at this woman
Wow.
crying because she can touch her hair for the first time in 3 months.
Holy
That
moly.
was extraordinary. We knew we had a good product. It's the hardest one
Yeah.
to sell, though. So
Why?
until someone experiences it, you can't explain it to them. Whether you call it a spray, a mist,
Mhm.
an aerosol,
Right.
until they spray it on, they just don't know. The balm is much more known. Salves and
Yeah,
balms are known
right,
forever.
sure.
And who doesn't know what Vicks formula does and have a mom that shoved it on them sometime, someplace in their life?
Exactly.
The Maggie's balm is the extraordinary one. It's the one that went viral. It's a very organic product with all these different ingredients that sell in products all across the shelf. You could look at 14 different products that are all in one. So I had to make sure per ingredient, the dosing was correct per that ingredient to achieve therapeutic. So you could pull any one of these ingredients out and it still functions, but it makes it an extraordinary product.
Mhm.
Early on, it was an expensive product to manufacture. We got the manufacturing pricing down, so it made it more available.
Horrible, yeah.
And we have introduced lesser versions of the Maggie's platform into
Mhm.
Walgreens. Walgreens carries less ingredients, but same effectiveness for what a CBD can do. And it became the #1 selling product in the pain aisle in Walgreens, which
Wow.
ultimately in mass pharmacy, we have the top 2 selling products per SKU.
Is it a CBD unlimited product when you
Yes.
see it at Walgreens?
So it's branded CBD Unlimited instead of Maggie's.
Okay, gotcha.
So we have the one that's the premium, you could, any doctor, anybody else could sell this product for that purpose.
Right.
This one is, it does the job and it's the right price point for the majority of people.
Yeah, that's for me, people that ask about it, it's the price is what limits them to what they're going to use. That's the problem. But then you also have an X line. Is that something totally different too?
We kind of designed that for the medical community.
Okay.
Instead of having and it was more, it's the same exact formulas. It's just, we wanted it to have a differentiation. So if medical practitioners wanted to bring this into their market, it would be branded for them and not be out in the regular market. We did do an initial launch on Walgreens because it had more of a pharmaceutical look and feel to it. But in the end, that's not what the consumer wanted. They wanted price points.
Right.
They wanted to try it. And if it works, I'll buy it again, type of thing.
True.
For the doctor, they want it to be, listen, you go buy it under a different brand name. Here's the highest dosing you can have before you break compliance.
Right.
And we have noticed a lot of our competitors, and this goes for other topical products too, that have too much of something in it. Too much menthol, too much camphor, too much lidocaine. These things can have debilitating effects and burn skin, So, we're very, we per ingredient, we're in line with max compliance, on any one of our ingredient formulations.
So you have CBD Unlimited has been going on almost 10 years, 10 years next year. And then tell me about Endexx. Is this like a different company? Is it
Endexx is Endexx is a
that?
publicly traded corporation.
Okay.
And we've developed multiple products and technologies over time. When we got into the cannabis space, we were actually the 8th public company in all the cannabis industry. We came in from a compliance and tracking platform to help governments and dispensaries work together. There was no structure in the industry. It was a nightmare.
True. Right.
So we built this for communicating with the Canadian government, the Washington state government, the Arizona state, the Nevada, Colorado. There was these systems that were out there were terrible. I mean, they would take RFID tags, put them in each plant pot, then gather up all the RFID tags, removing them from the plant pot at harvest. What are you tracking here?
Exactly.
So that's kind of what led me to the CBD part. You know, we watched this nightmare of a compliance platform in the industry just unfolding, and how the bud tenders were communicating with the consumer. And ultimately I said, listen, guys, I go, we can't make any money in compliance or tracking. The state governments didn't really want to know. That's your compliance breakdown right there. And your growers didn't want anybody to know what they were doing. There's your tracking platform issue. So we said, and as I'm sitting in dispensaries and I'm talking to doctors that are getting into practice, I said, what's the number one thing you're seeing? And the word CBD kept coming up. And I said, all right, let's test it. So shortly after we started these base testing, that's when they announced the 2014 pilot program. So I said, we're going for this, but we're going to treat it like a biotech play and not as a hokey plant miracle play.
Right.
That's why we went for dosing first. Dosing, delivery, and then administration.
Right. Now, so, and you have such great experience. Oh my gosh. So everything's this sounds like the company's doing great.
Yeah, we've actually, Endexx Corporation, we've introduced a new line of products, and it goes back to the vaping industry. Look at vaping right now. It's a very popular, it's the market's in place, but the regulators are all over it.
Right.
So they can't really regulate nicotine. So they start regulating flavors because, well, kids like flavors. Well, so do adults. Nobody likes the taste of straight up nicotine. They like nicotine, but they want the dose. So as we've been watching that industry kind of get crippled more and more, Juul got pulled off a shelf last year in a final, push by the government. And I was looking at vaping mechanisms other than CBD, saying, all right, is there any other medicines? And I met I was introduced to a company called Hyla, and Hyla had two molecules that they were putting in to displace nicotine products. One was guarana, which is a plant-based caffeine type product molecule. And the other one was L-Dopa, which was a precursor to dopamine, which is also what nicotine is. Nicotine is synthetic dopamine. It's a displacement. So I went, I looked at the two molecules and I said, all right, what's our focus? What are we going to deliver this on? Do we want to be involved with this? So after looking at it, the L-Dopa, the guarana was good because it is a stimulus, a focus factor. You don't have jitters after using it like you would with coffee or some other form of nicotine or caffeine. Then I looked at L-Dopa and I was going, where do I know that name from? Robin Williams and Robert De Niro, old movie.
Right, that's right.
Was that what it is? So I started looking at the bean, I started looking at the species, I started looking at the molecule, the application, the dosing, everything else. They had a well-dosed product already. They had already formulated. So I said, let's test it. So I asked them to send me a couple products, and I gave it to a couple patients that were kind of early stage Parkinson's or Parkinson's light. They know what's going on. They're not shaking crazy, but you could see them articulating words were getting more difficult. Sleeping was becoming restless. So I gave it to a few of them. They all slept better. I said, okay, good sign. Then I actually physically watched people go from a little bit slow to speech and slow in articulation to being crisp and clear and focused. I was going, all right, we have something here.
You do.
So we haven't done a lot of medical testing or clinical testing yet, but the product is helping people.
Right.
As a precursor to dopamine, it's helping people withdraw from nicotine comfortably.
Right.
It's allowing them to displace the nicotine use and not have the withdrawal symptoms. So is it a smoking cessation product? I don't know yet.
Right.
I don't know if it's a habitual thing or a dependency thing, but it looks like it's going to be able to facilitate that transition. And what better product to put on the shelf in displacement of Juul than a product that's helping people get off nicotine or help support it anyway.
I like the way you describe it too. It does sound healthier. Plant-powered puffs. That's something that I had read. I mean, it seems.
And then again, the dosing, L-Dopa crosses the blood-brain barrier. A lot of natural plants do, but L-Dopa crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it allows for a different effective delivery. So when you have that, you have to be really careful on dosing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
if
sure.
you take too much of anything, it's a bad thing. You know,
Right.
when people smoke too much weed, it's a bad thing.
Right.
And when they're taking too much THC, it crosses the blood-brain barrier
Mhm.
too. So, you know, moderation and controlled dosing, you know, is something that
Well,
we
with
strive
everything.
for,
Right.
whether the consumer knows it or not. We're there to make sure it's the proper experience.
Oh, this is unbelievable stuff. You have done your due diligences, no doubt, Todd, with your company, and obviously any of your products, you make sure it's safe at the utmost importance. And
Yeah.
there's a good reason for why you're doing whatever product it is to help with different patients. Like you've done, it's amazing. I love the research that you did from 2014 on, because nobody's ever really done that on their own. They just want to take a product and just sell it. I try to educate as much as I can with dosing, but you've done beyond that because you have that experience with the patients.
That's where the biotech side comes in. And in
Yeah.
biotechnology, you know, in Western medicine technology, in the testing, they try to give you as much as they possibly can until you get sick and have negative side effects. And then they back it down.
Right.
But they don't back it down to the effective level. They just try to get rid of the negative side effects and
Mhm.
sell more of whatever it is.
So
In
true.
biotech, you're always looking for what can one molecule do?
Right.
How does it affect the body? How does it work with the body? And across all systems, all pieces. That to me it's better science, especially for something people are consuming.
Right.
Because
Right.
you cut to the chase. It works or it doesn't work. It makes you feel, it doesn't feel. It's nutritious, it's not nutritious.
Right.
You know, what are you getting yourself into? And you know, going back to due diligence in vaping, you know, I was really worried about going into vaping back in 2013, 2014, because every vape device that we would try had a tinny aftertaste.
Mhm.
Oh, what is going on? Is
Yeah,
this
right.
an ingredient?
Yeah.
So I sent the device out to an engineering team. And I wanted to know, when somebody pulls on this, when air pulls through, what happens? What chemicals are coming through? Turns out there was tin on the heat elements on the lead wire.
Wow.
And when you would heat up the lead wire going into the heating elements, it was releasing tin oxide. So people were inhaling tin oxide.
Oh my gosh.
So just doing a very simple test to find out what's going on allowed us to go buy the right equipment that didn't have it, that didn't have these metals that could potentially be in it. Because it wasn't the formula, it was the device at that time.
Wow.
10 years later, a lot's changed. You know, a lot safer devices are out there, but still, you know, just that little thing, you miss one thing and it could ruin everything.
That's unbelievable. All right. Well, I gotta go, Todd. I gotta get back to work. I appreciate all your information. But definitely keep in touch. I want to
My
look into
pleasure.
that mist too. I mean, I think it's a great product. So
Yeah, that's a product, you know, even in your office, you know, you can administer and say, listen, try this right here, right now, and tell me how, while you're in the session or in the appointment,
yeah,
you can have
Yeah,
someone
go.
have an experience,
Yeah.
and then you know right there.
Right. I'm
So-
definitely gonna do it. All right, great. Good talking to you. Let's keep in touch.
Okay, Dr.
Right,
Rocco,
Todd?
thanks for your time. We'll see
You're
ya.
welcome.